There she is. I was wondering where you were. Now we can start. See, we've been waiting for Sharon. All right, 36 and verse 1. As you were talking a while ago, they were hiring criminals to be guards and stuff over there in the North Dakota. You know, my outlaw stepdad, Dale Otto Remling. You know, you've heard about him. I've said little stories about him. When he got out of prison the last time, they hired him as a security guard. And who could you get better than some world-class criminal like that? He moved right across the street from the church, right over here, and the apartments right across the street. Anyway, but that was a long time ago. We buried him out there like an outlaw in the hills. And anyway, yeah, they hire a lot of outlaws to be bodyguards and stuff. They did that in the Old West too. 36 and verse 1. Talking about the generations of Esau. We Ele, Taladot, Esau, Hugh, Edom. All right, and these. Where there is and these, Ale. And these generation, the family histories, that's what it's talking about, the family histories of Esau. Esau means what? Harry. Harry, yeah. We got a guy right here in the room named Harry, don't we? And he, and in Hebrew, there are a lot of Greek words that have to take the place of this one here. I mean, a whole passel of them. Whew. You wouldn't believe how big. I mean, it'd fill up 20 pages of what it takes for this one Hebrew word. Hugh, on page 214 and 15, covers a lot of area. Edom. Edom means what? Edom. Edom. Red. Red. All right. Yeah, almost. Yeah. Dom means red or blood. All right. Dom means red or blood. And Esau's wives were taken from a cursed people, and he was not a believer. Everything that Esau did to prove that he was not a believer, and he was not worthy of being the heir. Now, Esau and Ishmael, their descendants, and Lot's descendants, all married together, and they became the Arab nations. That's what we have today. This is the origin of the Arab nations right here. All right? And Esau he had taken. Esau Lakah. Esau Lakah. All right. Et. Nashah. Bebanot. Canaan. Et. Adah. Lot. Edon. Hahiti. Weeth. Aholibamah. Bat. Anah. And that verse goes on. Bat. Sivon. Ha. Shivui. Esau, he had taken his wives. All right? Now what did Jacob do? What did Jacob's father and mother tell him to do? Go marry your cousin, basically. Go marry your cousin. They were a bunch of heathens there, and they were a bunch of idolaters too. But they were not cursed. Where they are is a cursed people. A cursed people. These are Canaans. This is the land, the people in the land of Canaan, which were descendants of Ham's son Canaan, which were cursed. Okay? Now, the old Southern Baptists, long time ago, they used to use these verses about these cursed people to say that all black people were cursed to be slaves, and that was God's provision for them, and that's what they were. All right. We're going to study a little bit about the Hamite race tonight. A little bit. Okay? Esau had taken his wives, from daughters of Canaan, a cursed people. Okay? Ada. Ada means pleasure and beauty. Ada means pleasure and beauty. Daughter of Elon. Elon means a strong oak. A strong oak. The Hittite. All right, the Hittites. And Oholibamah. All right, Oholibamah. Now, Oholibamah means tent. All right, it means tent, like a teepee, or a hogan, or a whatever. You know, it means a tent. And the girl's name was a tent in her. A tent in her is what her name really means. A tent in her. And they would make a tent on a high place, and these tents are these temporary dwelling places. These shavot, these lean-tos and tents is where they would go worship deities, idols. Okay, so these are idolaters, and a tent in her, and her name means that she was a place that that they would go worship idols. Daughter of Anna. All right. Anna means answer or answering. Answer or answering. And by the way, the cross-reference to these is Genesis 9:25. Okay? Romans 9:12 through 13, Malachi 1:2 through 4, and Genesis 4:9 through 23, and about Lamech's wife, another woman by that name. Malachi 1:2 through 4 is where it says that Esau I hated and Jacob I loved. And that is repeated several times in the book of Romans also. Esau I hated and Jacob I loved. Daughter of Zibeon. Zibeon means hyena. That means hyena, the Hivite. All right? And let's go on now, and let's just see how all of these people get all conglomerated up into the Arabic races. Okay? This is the origin of the Middle East crisis, the Middle East wars, the problem in the Middle East. This is where it all began. Weeth, Basemath, Bath, Yishmael, Achot, Nebayot. All right. And Basemath. Basemath. Basemath means fragrant or perfume. All right? A girl that smelled good. All right? A girl that smells good. Daughter of Ishmael. Here we go. Now, let's look at this. Here's Abraham. And here is Isaac. All right? What was Abraham's firstborn child? Huh? Ishmael. All right. What does this name mean? God hears. God hears. God to hear. Remember, his mother Hagar was a poor little slave girl that had no, absolutely no control over her destiny. Okay? She had no control over her destiny at all. Well, Ishmael was the firstborn, and then what was the next one? Isaac. All right. Isaac was the secondborn. We have a universal, basic law in Scripture of the rejection of the firstborn. The rejection of the firstborn. You'll see that many, many times in the Bible. And your first birth is rejected. Because you're born into sin, you're born into, as a child of hell, basically. If you don't repent before, if you're able mentally to make a decision in your life, and you grow up old enough, you are doomed with that first birth. The second birth is the only one that's going to get you in heaven. Isaac now. Isaac, and he had two boys too, didn't he? Esau and Jacob. Jacob was the the youngest one, and Esau was the oldest. Now, if you were an Arab today, okay, you're an Arab. Brother Euless, you're an Arab. Okay, you're going to act like you're an Arab. Okay? You would say, if you were an Arab today, I have a right to the Holy Land. I have a right to Palestine. Because my forefathers were the firstborn sons of the patriarchs. Now, is that true or not? That's true. That's true. That's legitimate. But we know that God rejected them. But they are the firstborn heirs. All right? They are the heirs. Isaac had Esau and Jacob. Now, look, see what's happening here now. Here we have Ishmael, and now we have Esau. Now we have them combining. All right? And also, Abraham had a nephew. All right? The nephew, what was his name? Lot. All right? Now, Lot, he was such a poor child, a poor witness as a child of God, that he went down and he was a materialist. That's all he was, just a materialist. And living for the day. He lived for the very present day. And Abraham and Lot's herders got in an argument, and Abraham said, you look to the right hand or you look to the left hand, and whichever way you go, I'll go the other. So what did Lot do? He looked down there and he said, boy, look at that beautiful grassland. Guess what I'm going to choose? And Abraham, of course, was left the high desert. And Lot went down there, and no one did go down there in the lush valleys, but he went right down there and became a judge and a lawyer in Sodom. And lived like a lost man. And had no witness at all of his faith, period. And he lived with a bunch of rats. He went down there, and foreign kings came in there and hauled them all off and whooped them. And Jehovah sent Abraham to go rescue him. Abraham went down and whooped all of them and rescued them and took them back, and they went back in the land. But they lived like rats. They lived like the worse than dogs. It was a land of homosexuality and perversion and whoredom like no other place on earth at that time. Well, God destroyed it. And he had to drag Lot out of it. And Lot's wife was such a materialist like him, she probably wasn't even lost. Wasn't even saved. Anyway, she looked back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And the daughters were being dragged along there with him. They got up there, and he lived in a cave. And both of them got him drunk. And they had two children, one Moab, which means water from the father, or semen from the father. And the other one is Ammon, which means people of my people. In other words, I'm inbred. They were proud of being inbred. Okay? And so we have those two children, and now we have all of it all lumped together here. This is the Middle East crisis, the base of the Middle East crisis, okay? Basis, the daughter of Ishmael, sister of Nebaioth, the eldest son of Ishmael, okay? Nebaioth. He's Nabatean. Now, God had sworn that Ishmael would not inherit with Isaac, didn't he? Esau is doing all the wrong things because he's not a believer. Genesis 21:8 through 14 and Genesis 26:18. (36 and verse 4 now. Going a little further. Wataled Adah Le'Esau Eth Eliphaz Uvasmith Yalidah Et Ruel We Ahalibama Yeladah Et Yosh Wiet. And then Yalam Wiet Gardah Eleh Benay Esau Asher, and then Uledu and Lo Baaretz Canaan. And she had birthed Ada, that means beautiful one, to Esau, Eliphaz. Eliphaz means fine gold, all right? And Eliphaz also was Job's friend back in Job 2 and 11. Remember, of course, he wasn't much of a friend, was he? We know that. Eliphaz means fine gold. And Basemath, she birthed Ruel. Ruel means friendly. Ruel, friendly. Moses' father-in-law, but one of the names of Moses' father-in-law, by the way, was Ruel. I think he had 5 names. Moses' father-in-law had about 5 names. By the way, Moses' father-in-law is the one that invented the Sanhedrin court. Did you know that? The 70. That's where it came from. All right? It was from his father-in-law. And Oholibamah, 10 of the high place, she had birthed Jewish. He comes to help. And Yolam. Yolam means Jehovah abides. And Korah means baldness. And these sons of Esau who were born to him in land of Canaan. Born to him in land of Canaan. And then Yikah, Esau, Eth, Nasal, Weeth, Banah, Weeth, Benoto, Weeth, Kal, Nafshot, Beto, Weeth, Miknahu, Weeth, Kal, Behimato, Behimto, that is. Weeth, Kal, Gen Yadno, Asher, Rakash, all right, Be'eretz, Canaan, Wayelek, El, Eretz, Mipane, Yaakov, Achub. All right, that's a long verse. Long verse. And he took Esau his wives, and his sons, and his daughters, and all the souls of his house. Look at the word souls there. All those individuals of life of his house, and his cattle, and all of his beasts of burdens. These could even mean, that word means dumb. That's an Arabic word, okay? It means dumb. It could even mean elephant. He might have had some elephants, okay? He had some large beasts of burden there, all right? And all of his portable property, all of his acquired property, which he had acquired in land of Canaan. Canaan means possession or acquisition. And he went and he walked unto the land from the face of Jacob his brother. From the face of Jacob his brother. All right. 30. Yes.
Abraham had 7 more sons. Later on, did they also intermarry with this group?
Yeah, they went all over. Now those are Japhethites. Abraham married 3 women. His first wife was a Hamite. Okay. His second wife was a Shemite, and his third wife was a Japhethite. So Abraham is a father of many people in all 3 races. We all probably go back to Abraham, almost everybody in this room. I know that I do, literally, because from my DNA. Okay? We all go back a long way. Now let's go. Gabby, you want to come up here and bring your Bible up there and read from 1 through 6 for me, please? 1 through 6. All right. What? Oh, you might have trouble with the names?
Yeah, I'll try though. Okay. Through what? 6?
Yeah, 1 through 6.
Okay. Now this is the history of the descendants of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan. Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, daughter of Anah, the son of Zibeon the Hivite. And Basemath, Ishmael's daughter, sister of
Nebios. Yeah.
Nebios. Adah bore to Esau, Eliphaz. Basemath bore Reuel. And Oholibamah bore Yush, Joam, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau born to him in Canaan. Now Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his cattle, all his beasts, and all his possessions, which he had obtained in the land of Canaan. And he went into a land away from his brother Jacob.
All right, so they're going away now because the cattle and all the animals, they take up a lot of feed. Now let's go see what in the world's going on all the way over here in America now. Let's go over here, okay? Plumb across the world, okay? Let's see what's happening at the same time in this country. We know that, and who's over here in this country? What people are populating America? From, what are they? Hamites. The Hamites are in America. Now we know that the Hamitic languages, the Hamites would go further than anybody else. All right? They would go further than anyone else. Now I'm using, I've read about several hundred books on archaeology and anthropology. The Doorway Papers, there's 10 volumes on it. 10 volumes, okay? And I have shared them with you early in the classes. How many of you were in the very first part of the Genesis classes? Okay, we went in where we divided the earth, and the days of Peleg, God divided the earth. This is a book that hasn't been out too long. It's called 1491, America Before Columbus. It's very good. By Charles Mann. Here's another one called The Indian Givers. They're Hamites now. They're Hamites. They came over here, and we know that the Hamites went out further. They trailblazers that would go further than any place. They were the ones on the outreaches of what we call civilization. Also, we understand that the Hamites invented almost everything that was ever invented. Period. The Hamites invented medicine. They invented pharmacy, all the pharmaceuticals. 70% of all of the pharmaceutical drugs that we have today came from the Native American people in America. Did you know that? 70%. 3/5 of all food in the world today came from America. The Americas. Okay. Now, way back over here now, we've got the origin of the Arab races in the Middle East. Now, this is with Esau, and we have Ishmael, and we have Lot's families all coming together, and we're going to see them tie all together over there. And what kind of a culture do we have over there in the Middle East? Basic, it's a nomadic and somewhat farmlands. The land of Canaan, they had primitive farmlands there, basically. And how about Europe? This was before the Roman Empire. We have a bunch of basic savages up there, and headhunters and cannibals up in what we call Britain and up through there. And we have the Germanic tribes. We also have Genghis Khan running across over there. And we have the Medes and the Persians fighting later on even. This is even before them now. Now let's go over here to the Americas and see what we find over here. In the 1800s and 1700s, when the people came to America, they said this was the most pristine wilderness that they had ever seen in the world. That was not true. Not true at all. The greatest societies in the world, there was 150 million people living on these continents. This was the most populous place in the world, and these are Hamites living in the Americas. In Meso and South America were their greatest, tremendous societies down there. They had money. They had gold and silver so much. How many of you ever heard of the El Dorado? The stories of El Dorado with Lazario and all of them looking for the... You know, any of you ever really hear what it was about? There was rulers down there for hundreds of years. I mean, way back here, during this period of time, they had already invented math. They had already working on calendars. Way before they ever did the Arabic system of numerals or anything, they invented zero already at this time in America. They had roads going all the way across South America into North America. And North America, Indians were trading all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. And they managed the ecosystem tremendously. Down in South America. Down in South America, they had tremendous plantations. They had farms at 10,000 and 11,000, 12,000 and 13,000 feet. Irrigation systems, canals that were lined with pottery, or basically cement-lined canals, all over down there. Great ruler systems, great big kings and rulers down there that they looked upon as deity. Okay, they looked upon these rulers as deity, like they did in China, because these people are Oriental. There was about 3 different migrations that came here from Asia. But basically, how the people got in America was that when God divided the earth, that's where they were. Now, and of course, when you went to school, they didn't teach you any of this, did they? Because they didn't want to believe it. For one thing, they didn't want to believe it. Okay? This was the most populous place in the world with more food than any place in the world. There was no disease here. No disease. I don't know why that God did not plague these continents with disease. I don't know why. That's a mystery. Now North America, the pristine wilderness that they said was here was not here. How many of you heard the Great Plains? Did you know that the Great Plains were created by the Indians? They used fire to clear. They set the plains on fire. They burned out all the mesquite and everything else, burned it where it was nothing but prairie grass. 1/3 of the North American continent was under cultivation before 1491. 1/3 of the North American continent. There was canals and systems all through, but every great empire is built upon what?
Slavery.
Slavery. Thank you, brother. Slavery and manipulation of the masses. That's how it's built. Okay. Now, keep an eye about what's going over here in the Middle East right now, and let's just look over here in America and see what's going on over here. The North American Indians burned from one end of this place to the other. There was heavy forests. How many of you how many of you have seen the great big nut groves and everything in the Midwest and the East Coast? Great big nut trees and groves and stuff, and peach trees. These just didn't happen, people. Those Indians cultivated them. They bred the corn. There was tremendous cornfields all over, from east to west coast. American Indians had cultivated all of this. They had burned all, and I've said this for much of what I'm saying tonight. You've heard me teach for the last 40 years, some of you, many years. The Indians used fire. They controlled burning. They completely went through the Midwest. The bison were out in the Kansas and Texas and stuff throughout there. That's where the bison were, and almost all out here in Utah and whatever. The Indians burned the brush, and they created great prairies and savannas all the way to New York. They cut down trees. They burned them up. They would set the fires every year. When the white man first came to the Anglo-Saxons, first came to this continent, said those Indians burning the place up. Every year they set the place on fire. They killed all the fleas, all the ticks, and all the lice, and everything else was burned up ahead of them. And they took and made basically they were great in animal husbandry. Over there now we have Abraham, we have Isaac, we have Jacob, we have Esau, all of them. What do they have for animals? Maybe Esau even had some elephants, okay? All right. And they had all kinds of camels and donkeys and cattle, and they had sheep and goats, didn't they? All over there. Over here in America, American Indians, their portable food was bison and mule deer and elk and moose. And they burned from north to south, and they burned through all of these places, and they kept the trees. They say when they first came here, you could drive a whole army of horses right through in between a forest because it was all clear underneath. And all of the grass had been burned every year. They burned all the undergrowth every year and killed all of the undergrowth so they would have plenty of room to graze cattle. The cattle they grazed were elk and deer and bison. All the way back to the East Coast, all the way to New York and Massachusetts and everything, they drove the buffalo. They weren't there originally. But they would burn those prairies, burn those forests down there and put in between, and they would put pecan trees and walnut trees, and they would put all kinds of fruit trees, plum trees and oak trees, whatever. But they kept a lot of room underneath so their cattle, the bison, could graze. And then they set the fires and drove the bison back there. They drove their food source back there too. And of course they had wild goats, they had mountain sheep, and they had elk, and they had deer, and a lot of bison. Before 1491, there were about 60 million buffalo in the Americas. 60 million. When Columbus came, he brought disease. When the Spaniards, Pizarro went into South America looking for El Dorado. Let's get back to what I was saying a while ago, El Dorado. They had so much gold down there in South America that they would take gold dust, and every year the rulers, they would cover him and paint him with gold dust. And then he would go wash that for hundreds of years now. We're talking about thousands of years. I have been in caves in America here where there's been occupation where Indians were out hunting for 6,000 years. America is just as old as Europe or the Middle East, okay? Except everything that was here, all the written histories, the Incas and the Aztec, they had paper. They had written documents, written histories. All of that's been destroyed. All of the North American Indians, they had family historians, and on blankets and they had written down in pictographs all the history of the people for millennia. I'm talking about thousands of years. But it was all burned. The Spanish burned everything in South America. And they destroyed all the monuments and all the big cities. When Pizarro came here, he said, this is the greatest civilization. He said, this is greater than anything in Europe. These monuments and the great big cities. I don't know whether any of you have ever seen those cities in South America and Central America. They were unbelievable. Big, like New York City. London or France or Germany, nowhere had big cities like they had in the Americas. I've told this for the last, been talking about it since I've been in the book of Genesis for the last 2 or 3 years. This is the first time I ever laid all this on you at one time. But after 1492, when Columbus came here, Columbus took all kinds of food back to Europe. A lot of them they didn't like, the peanuts, and there's this whole book here tells you all of the food stuff that they took back to Europe that they never had before. Europe was starving to death. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock and went in there, they said the average Indian diet was 2,500 calories a day. What are you supposed to be eating? What's the doctor say today? 2,500 calories a day. That's real good for you. The Indians were living to be 100 years old in America. They had all kinds of pharmaceuticals, but they called it witch doctrine, because they were really messed up over in Europe. They were bleeding each other and putting leeches on each other and over there, everything over there. That was a Greek idea of medicine. Well, they said the Indians were just burning everything up. They burned the fields. Every year they burned the fields. It killed all of the lice and the ticks and the chiggers and all that every year.
Well, another thing, the reason why they did it, it generated new grass
Yeah, every day, every year, new grass would come up better than before. It would burn out all the undergrowth, all the termites, all the vermin, all the disease. It kept all the trees healthy. And Europe was destroying itself. They were having wars from one end of the thing to the other and chopping down the forests all over. Europe was tremendously forested, just like America was, except they used it up. And the land, they burned it out. One of the greatest exports in South America was what? Not only gold and silver, but what? Iguana. That done. To try to fertilize and get the ground to grow back in Europe again. They burned it out. All right? They were doing all that over here. From east to west coast. When the disease hit the Indians, it completely depopulated the Americas. Some people say up to 90 to 98% of the population died of disease. And so when the buffalo went to 100 million instead of 60 million in the Great Plains. But then back in Illinois and Indiana and Massachusetts and New York, the Indians kept coming in this way. And the Plains Indians became nomadic because they had to get away from the disease. They were still the brilliant scholars that they were that built all the societies and everything else. But they became more nomadic. More nomadic. And when by 1800, the place that was so manicured ecosystem that the Indians manicured had become a wilderness again. Because no one was there to burn it off. No one was there to keep the land in balance at all. Yes, Brother Euless.
On our farm, we used to burn just about every year.
Yeah, they burned it all.
Yeah.
It killed all of the vermin.
Yeah, wet coal sacks.
Yeah.
So you could make sure you could control it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They did, but the Indians used fire. They used fire. They said the Indian back in the early when they first came to the continent, an Indian carried flints with him all over so he could start fires, and they were always burning. Thomas Jefferson said you'd think the people were burning the place up from coast to coast, all back there. All right, now let's go back to Europe and back to the Middle East. Now this is what's going on over here. This is a society over here. Now, why did all this happen this way? We know that when we studied the book of Genesis and when we had the division of the races, who would follow the Hamites and all of their exploring? Who would follow the Hamites? Who were the people that were destined to follow the Hamites? Japhethites. Japhath means what? Spreading. And they spread out, but they followed the Hamites. And it is a historical fact, an anthropological fact, that every place the Hamites went, the Japhethites would come behind them and destroy their culture. And take it over, and every invention that they made, they would improve it, or whatever. Who invented gunpowder? The Chinese. What are they? Hamites. Who invented the first cast iron stoves? Huh? The Chinese. Who invented the flush toilet? The Chinese. Who invented hygiene? The Hamites. It wasn't the Japhethites. Over on this continent now, when the white people came here, the Indians looked at them and they said, "Boy, they're the stinkingest, smelliest people. They don't have any hygiene. Look, they smell. They're ugly and they're short." And they got hair all over their faces.
How do you spell Hamite?
Hamite, okay? Hamite. All right. That's Ham's descendants, okay? But they said they carry real good needle trinkets. He said, and we're trading them our scraps for their good stuff. The old worn out hides and stuff, they were trading them, and all of the stuff that they had plenty of for these pots and pans and jewelry and beads and things. They started a whole culture in France and Italy and I can't even think of all the different places over there. They made beads. You know why they made glass beads? For only one reason: to trade to the Indians. And the Indians didn't believe in land ownership. It was only for us to use. And so when the white man wanted to start buying the land, they said, ha, ha, ha. What a joke. Sure, we'll sell you something. Yes, it's it.
Who are
The Mayans?
the Mayans?
That's down in Central and South America. Yeah, Mayans and the Inca. We have the Aztec calendar. We have the Mayans and the Incas. They were all tremendously giant societies, but they were basically based upon slavery. And if you look at those, where does Africa come out of those continents? Where did they come from? If you look at the Egypt and the Egyptian pyramids and everything, you'll find out everything that's going over in Egypt was happening down here in Central and South America. They're all the pyramids and all the mass slavery, all of giant societies. The Egyptians were great, and they were advanced in all of their education and all their writing. What further than any of the others over there? And that was in America, and that's where the continent split and divided. Pangea was what they called the world, or Gondwana, before it was split. And then God divided, in the days of Peleg, God divided the earth. And I believe it just moved pretty fast. Of course, you know what made God divide the earth? The Tower of Babel. They're going to have a one world empire, and they all spoke one language. And then God divided the earth. And by the way, when they were building they were making all these things out of stone, weren't they? When you have a lot of earthquakes, stones don't stay on top of each other very well, do they? That's a little joke from God's side. Okay. Well, in South America, you'll find all of these great big stone deal. The mathematics were so perfect. Look at the Mayan calendar and the Aztec calendar. You know, they're expecting the world to come to the end. It was with such great mathematics. The zero was invented here before Christ. Advanced mathematics were in effect in South and Central America before Christ. During this time right here we're talking about. Right here. They're already building these giant societies here. And of course, this is when Egypt was in its zenith too, wasn't it? All right. So now you got a little bit of picture of the world. Okay, of what's going on all over the world. All right, 36 and verse 7 now. 36 and verse 7. Ki, Haya, Rikusham, Rob, Mish Shevet, Yada, Wilo, Yakila, Eretz, Mikurihem, Otam, Mipane, Miknehem. Because, that little word key there, look at that word, key, page 473 is what it's on in Brown, Driver, and Briggs, that book right there. Had become their possessions great from dwelling together, and not I wish I had my gun right. I wish I had my .45. I'd shoot that thing. Marilyn, you and your coffee pot. From dwelling together and not. She was able. The land she was not able to support her. Their pilgriming, their wandering of them. From the faces of their cattle. The cattle go and they graze as they go, don't they? They graze as they go. As the American Indian, they went back all the way to the East Coast and they said, we need buffalo back there. So they started chopping down trees, and out to the sides they had farms. They had tremendous corn farms and great big orchards, peach orchards, pecan orchards. How many of you ever had a hickory nut? A hickory nut? You had hickory handles and things on your holes and on your hammers and all that kind of stuff. Well, hickory, how many of you ever had an almond milk? Almond milk, all right? The Indians used to use hickory milk. Hickory milk. They would take the hickory nuts and pick them and smash them up real fine and then boil in water. They'd boil the water with them. And then they would pour off this fine milky thing that was just sweet and milky, and people, they used this all across America. And they planted those big orchards and farms. They had farms here before Christ, like that, before Christ. For hundreds and hundreds, for thousands of years, they lived like that. All right, the land couldn't support them. And the cattle, as their faces went, they had to have grass to eat, so they had to spread out. It takes a lot of ground. American Indians, they cut those trees down. They burned that prairie every year. They burned the prairie off so new grass would come up. Everything would be healthy. And when you have a healthy new crop and burnt crop, the crop always grows better. All right? And then they drove with fire. They'd set the fire behind the buffalo or the sheep or the goats or the deer and drive them into areas where they wanted to harvest them later. Just like they did in Texas. They had cattle down there in Texas. The Indians were raising they didn't have cattle farms. They had buffalo and deer farms all over. All right, Yeshiv, Esau, Bahar, Seir, Esau, Q, Edom. And kept on dwelling Esau in mountains. Esau liked the mountains. He was a mountain goat. Esau smelled like a goat, you know. Man, his daddy, when Jacob came in there, he said, "Let me smell of you." "Oh, you smell just like a goat." That's Esau, because he had his clothes on. Seir. What does seir mean? Seir. What does seir mean? That means goat. The place of mountain goats. The habitation of goats. Esau being Edom. Esau he, Edom. Turn this old machine over. By the way, Randall is getting up hundreds of classes in Greek. Hundreds of classes, just hundreds. If you go to discoverthewordwithdrjim.com and go into the Greek reading and research classes, there's probably at least 500 or 600 classes up there now. All from Greek, all different books of the Bible. And the same thing in Hebrew. We're trying to get everything out there together. I've been working, ripping things, and he's at home right now zipping things up there all over. The book of Revelation from Greek is there. The Gospel of John from Greek is there. And Colossians and First Corinthians and Romans and Ephesians, Galatians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Peter, James, Hebrews, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, Jude, Revelation, all from Greek. So go there and look at them. All right. And these, the generations, did I read that? We'eleh? Nope. Okay. We'eleh, Toledot, Esau, Avi, Edom, Bahar, Seir. All right. And these, the family histories of Esau, father of Edom. The color of blood in mountain of Seir. Now Mount Seir. And what place is this today? What is this place? What's this place called? Today, it's there today. Remember what this place is called? This is Petra. This is a Petra, the rose-red city of Petra, as they call it. And by the way, many Bible scholars believe this is where Israel, when God beats Israel over the head with all of her rulers and her treaties that she has made with the Antichrist, this is where God is going to save them when they run down to this area. It's been basically deserted for hundreds of years. When some of the explorers went out up and down the Mississippi and the Missouri and things, they looked out there and they said, "Man, this must have been this place is just full of wild animals. The Indians, when they died, when all of these Indians died, 90+% of the Indians died, the animals were still there, weren't they? They were still there. And they just kept multiplying. They went from like 60 million buffalo up to 100 million. And all these deer, they said, man, there's deer everywhere, there's bear all over the place. The Indians harvested the bear, they harvested the deer, they harvested the buffalo, all this stuff, all over the place. Harvested them, but when the Indians ceased to exist, the food source wasn't needed, so they just multiplied. The worst enemy of the American Indian was the pig. When they brought the pigs to this country, back in Mississippi, when my family, back in 1539 and 40, in Mississippi, when Hernando de Soto went among the Chickasaw Indians, they took care of him all winter long. Him and all his pigs. He had about 2,000 pigs. Lots of pigs. That was portable food for them. But pigs carry every kind of known disease in the world. They carried cholera. They carried tuberculosis. They carried syphilis. They carried smallpox and pox. Everything. And the Spanish had been living with those pigs for centuries, and they were immune to all those diseases. When they turned those pigs loose on the Mississippi, and those people were they had great farms back there. They lived in wooden houses that had plastered walls. Big mansions with great big farms. 1/3 of America was under cultivation at this time. It completely devastated the people. Almost all of them died. And the farms turned back into wilderness then, didn't they? Back when my family lived there, my great-great-great-grandmother, Ilatika, they had plantations still, but there weren't as many people there as they were in 1491. They were there. All of these great cultures were there at that time. But the pigs in South America, Pizarro had over 2,000 pigs. They said when the Spanish armies moved, they had a horde of pigs out in front of them. Out leading out was like dogs that were running pigs. There's hundreds of them, thousands. Pizarro had 2,000 pigs. Spreading disease every place they went. Spreading disease. By the way, what does the Bible tell? What did Moses tell, or what did God tell Moses to do with pig meat? Don't eat it. Do you know why now? All of the disease, the trichinosis, everything they carried all kinds of diseases. And back in those people, they were in a hurry not to cook it real good, you know. I think one of the reasons why God didn't want pigs to be eaten is they're smarter than people are. And more intelligent. You shouldn't eat anything smarter than you. All right. 30 and verse 36 and verse 10. Ele, Shemoth, Bene, Esau, Eliphaz, Bene, Ada, Esheth, Esau, Ruel, Ben, Basemath, Eshet, Esau. These names of sons of Esau: Eliphaz, son of Ada, and wife of Esau; Ruel, son of Basemath, and wife of Esau. Gabby, you want to bring your little Bible back up here and read up to number 10. What, 6 through 10, I think.
Okay.
36, 6 through 10.
Now Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his cattle, all his beasts, and all his possessions, which he had obtained in the land of Canaan, and he went into a land away from his brother Jacob. For their great flocks and herds and possessions, which they had collected, made it impossible for them to dwell together. The land in which they were strangers could not support them because of their livestock. So Esau dwelt in the hill country of Seir. Esau is Edom. And this is the history of the descendants of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, Esau's wife, and Reuel, the son of Basemath, Esau's wife.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes.
When it says their property had become too big for them to live together,
Yes.
he and Jacob were still.
They were still hanging around each other, but they had to spread out just like Lot and Abraham. The land could not support the animals. This land is poor over here. They only go by rain. The Indians over on this country, they had a lot of rain here. Not only did they have a lot of rain, but they also used canals. And they built around great rivers. And they're irrigated from the great rivers. They had all kinds of canals. How many of you ever heard about the burial mounds and everything back in there, and the great different in the Midwest? You know, the Smithsonian Institute suppressed all the information that I told you about tonight for 100 years because they didn't want the rest of the world to know that they completely destroyed a society in this continent so tremendous as it was. That information has been suppressed for a long, long time. I have studied, like I said, 100 books at least to give you the information. But just the last few years, this man put it down, and by the way, that person, just about from there on back, is the bibliography. That's where it is. Right there, that much of the book, this much of this book is the that's the bibliography right there. That's quite a bibliography. And from science, from medicine, from every angle, he did that. And of course, this one I read many, many years ago, and it tells about the food stuff. 70% of all the pharmaceutical medicines in the world came from the Americas, the Hamites. The Hamites were the great inventors. In the book of Genesis, who invented music? The Hamites. All the musical instruments, the Hamites. Who invented the bow and the arrow? The Hamites. Who invented the guns? The Hamites. All of this, you just go back, and that's the culture that invented all these things, was the Hamite culture. And the Shemites, what were they interested in? Brother, the Shemites, what are they interested in? What was their great claim to fame? God. They were interested in spiritual things. Spiritual things. And how about the Japhethites? Control. Control. Manipulation of the masses. All right. And they would follow the Hamites and put them under slavery. Under slavery. Almost all the way down through history. They would use the Hamites for slaves. When Spain went down into South America, they wouldn't even feed the Indians. They started Mount Potosi down there and different places down in that area. They would use the Indians for slaves. Pizarro was looking for that lake where for thousands of years that those emperors, those rulers, those kings down there would take and they would cover him with gold, and then he would go wash himself off in the lake. He said the whole bottom of the lake was covered with gold. That was the great. That was what was it called? I said it earlier. El Dorado. That was El Dorado. And even down in was it Mexico, I believe, when that Spanish ruler went down there and they captured that king down there, Aztec, I believe it was. And they told him, he said, "I'll fill you 2 rooms full of silver and a room full of gold if you'll release me." And they brought it, and they filled the room with gold. And then they murdered him. They didn't keep up their end of the bargain because he was just an Indian. Anyway, that's the history of the whole world almost in a nutshell. The 3 races of man. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And that's where we are today. What they did, we're the product of all of that. Of course, I'm a product of all 3 of those races. And probably you are too. I don't think there's anyone here that's not part Hamite and Shamite and Japhethite. Because Abraham was our father, almost every one of us. If you did your DNA, you'll see it goes back to Levantine and back in the Middle East. And you'll see that probably Abraham was your great-great-great-grandfather 90 generations ago. But that's how the world spread out, and that's what the population was of the world. All right, you ready to go out and do something eternal? Was it worth coming tonight? By the way, I made extra copies of the lesson this morning. If any of you want that on DVD or CD, I know some of them ordered it this morning. I've got some of them with me. And go out and do something eternal. Brother Mike, you want to come up here and dismiss us in prayer, brother?
Father God, thank you for the blessings of this day. Thank you for your wonderful power and just the way that you surround us each day. Thank you for this beautiful fellowship and this wonderful lesson. Let's lift everyone in this room up for your grace and love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Please pray for me. I had a rough time tonight. But huh? Oh, yeah, that goes to the thing. We went from 1 through 11, 1 through 10 tonight, didn't we? That poison was eating me up tonight, boy.